Hello, I'm Jenny Fern and welcome to my library. Today I want to do a reading vlog where I read the three books that I picked out in the video where I read my little free library. So the first book that I've started reading from that batch is On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan, who is the author of Atonement. The reason I'm reading it is because it had such a vague description. The book seems quite short as well. It's like 200 pages. I'm at the halfway point now, and the text is very spaced out. So the back of the book basically says that it's 1962. They're on the Dorset coast. This married couple, it's their wedding night, and they make a decision that night with respect to their marital duties. How can you write an entire book about that? I am now at page 101. I thought it'd be a good time to check in before I finish the whole dang thing. We start with Florence and Edward. We start during their wedding night dinner. They're at a hotel. They're getting food delivered to them. Edward is really excited to have sex for the first time, and that Florence is dreading it. It seems that she's asexual. It goes, from his perspective to her perspective about the night's events, as they're eating their dinner. Edward's like, ooh, I can't wait. And Florence is like, oh God, I hope it doesn't have to happen. We get to a point where they're kissing and Florence is trying to find her way out of there, basically. And then we get to chapter 2. And chapter 2 is about their pasts and how they met. There are some sections that talk about kind of the politics of the day. So it's 1960s Britain. Because they're younger people, they're in their 20s, they have rebellious ideas compared to their parents. Protest against the hydrogen bomb and nuclear weapons. The idea of Britain not being an empire anymore. Kind of historical context has been pretty interesting to read. I did just read honestly a beautifully written section about Edward's mother, who has brain damage, and I really enjoyed the whole description of how she acts around the house and how she tries to take care of her children but isn't exactly capable of doing that, and also how she got her brain injury. All of those descriptions were really beautiful. Just started chapter 3, so we're back on the wedding night. I think I'm dreading it as much as Florence at this point. She's trying to persuade herself to communicate how she feels right now. We'll see. So it's 10 a.m. I just finished reading On Chesil Beach. I really liked this. Surprising to me the way it ended, but it also seemed like the most honest way to end it. This book has some wonderful exploration of patriarchy and the differences between how men and women see things and how society has shaped their understanding of their own responsibilities, how they should be seen in the world. So adept at showing the unfairness of these expectations placed on both men and women. This was just really, really good. I think it's ultimately a book about regret. The communication that takes place in this book seems so realistic. It's also shocking to see how much hasn't changed in terms of communication and expectations of men and women. It just brought so much more to the table than I was expecting. The subject of asexuality and also sex expectations in married life. Seeing that topic in early 1960s was really, really interesting. I think we tend to see those things as more modern subjects, but of course they've been around forever because humans have these things going on in their lives, They don't just go away because of societal expectations. There were also a few details that I really enjoyed. There is an earlier description of our main guy, Edward, as knowing the trees and the plants and the birds he can name them. And when he goes to a bigger city, he realizes that that shows how country he is. So he refuses to acknowledge like the birds and plants. And then when he is dating Florence, he feels comfortable enough, I guess, and also she appreciates this aspect of him where he is able to name the birds and the plants. And it really shows how they did love each other. I will say that this book really focuses on Edward as the main character. There are scenes that go from Edward's perspective to Florence's perspective, but when we see Edward's family, we see them through his eyes, and when we see Florence's family, we also see them through her eyes. There was one scene that was genuinely very confusing to me, and I thought maybe it was going this way. There's something from Florence's perspective where she's on a ship and her dad is like undressing, and she remembers this when her husband Edward is undressing on their wedding night. And I think I need to look it up if it is implied that she was molested by her father, or if it was just like a complete misinterpretation on my part, because I feel like if that was implied, it was really, really unclear. So I actually need to look that up. I was thinking, oh, maybe they're going in this direction for this book, and in which case I would be pretty disappointed. Okay, apparently this has also been a movie, but evidently, yes, she was molested by her father. I would like to choose to read it not that way. She makes a statement, which is basically like, I've never wanted this type of contact, which to me is just like, she is asexual. I don't know, it seems a little bit invalidating that that would be triggered by trauma response, that it's a trauma response and not her being asexual. So it's a little bit disappointing. I definitely didn't read it that way. To have her being molested as a single page that is really not clear at all, and she doesn't discuss it in any way. It just doesn't really feel appropriate to me, or like it rings true to life that she would recall being molested as a child for one page of this book, and it never comes up ever again. And to not have her perspective and her feelings on that incident at all in any way as a clear depiction or anything that's clear at all, to have it only be briefly mentioned and in a very unclear way. I am actually very disappointed that that was what was supposed to be implied. So that kind of changes things. If you took out that one page of the book, this would be a very excellent book and very well written. There are a few other problems that I have with it. It's basically this line, which says that she looked like an American Indian woman, and then it uses a slur. So I'm not interested in that, and I feel like that line was completely inappropriate and unnecessary. Otherwise, I feel like it can read as a very, very interesting exploration into the relationships and the roles of men and women in society, especially when it comes to sex. I'm just so disappointed that that was actually a scene of molestation or rape. That's so disappointing that it was handled that way. It's very confusing now how to feel about this book. I wonder why the author put it in there, you know. Maybe it was a way to give people who are not understanding an out for coping with her being asexual or something. This almost feels like how I was conflicted when I read Memoirs of a Geisha, because it was so beautifully written, but then it just has some problems, with it. So I'm feeling kind of a similar way. I think if this was written in this day and age, because I think this is from 2007, they would probably take out that one page of the book. Like, so much of this book rings so true, except for that element of it, that I have to think that it was some weird choice to make it more palatable in some way. Maybe by the time I start reading the next book or read the next book, I will have processed this book a little bit more fully. Well, hello. I'm here to update you on my reading experience of Gun Machine. Maybe 4 days ago now, I decided to pick out a handful of books from my little free library. That little corner is probably like the best lighting arrangement that I have, but it's also close to my husband who just started playing video games, so I don't want any noise. He deserves to have a good time too. For Gun Machine, I have been reading this before going to bed. I'm only on page 24. The other night I finished Purlieu the Bold, and then I started on Gun Machine, but I didn't get very far the first night. Things are happening. I've read 6 chapters so far, and the chapters are really short. The main character, his name is Tallow. His partner, his like cop partner, gets his brain shot out of his head. It is wild. I am so not used to reading anything like this. As we had learned from the plot summary on the back, they find a room full of guns that are all connected to unsolved murders. That's pretty much where we're at right now. At this point, our character Tallow has been tasked with this case. Instead of giving him time to like grieve or whatever, he's being punished with dealing with the discovery that he made. I have been a little bit distracted recently. My work life is being quite distracting right now, so sometimes my mind will drift to work, unfortunately, which is why it's great to block that all out. I do also have one other reading update for the 3 books that I selected from my little free library, and that is this cute little book here called The Well-Tempered Sentence. I kept saying that this was about grammar in that previous video, but it's really about punctuation. I was watching the race, the F1 race in Abu Dhabi, and I got so bored because it was a very boring race that I started reading this book. And it's basically just like, here's how to use a period, and then a bunch of examples. Like the first page is about the period. There's also these weird illustrations. So it's kind of an entertaining book, and I am reading it like front to back, which is definitely not how you're supposed to use it. You're supposed to use it as like a reference guide. So for example, what a swell story this has turned out to be. And there's this kind of demonic dude stew that we have as an illustration, which is pretty fun. Started dipping my toe into the comma, but the comma is complicated. It's actually very helpful to me to see when it's kind of up to your discretion whether you want to use a comma or not. It's helpful to have those like caveats, and also to say like, okay, in this case commas can be used. In this case, definitely don't use a comma. So it's been pretty helpful for me because commas, again, can be quite confusing. It seems pretty comprehensive. A comma follows the exclamatory O, but not the vocative O. So for example, oh, how ridiculous, and not, oh, gentle king. Isn't that interesting? But I am on page 36 right now, and there are 93 pages. That's my update. I'll see you later. Hi guys, I have an update on this reading challenge to read those 3 books from my little free library. So I've been reading Gun Machine this morning, and it is such a silly book so far. I haven't gotten very far, page 79, but I want to read a few quotes to give you an idea of the writing in this book. "You," said Scarly, "I hate you so much my dick is hard." That is from a female character. I have to say also, I got these bookshelves yesterday and it looks stunning. It looks stunning. It's like a perfect color match for my couch. I'm here to talk about Gun Machine. I had to do some surgery on my SD card to remove some files, so I'm back and I'm here with a quote. And I have to find the quote again. So this says, "He tried to close a hand around the precious coffee, but had to jerk his fingers away, sharply enough that his wrist popped painfully. Tallow wondered if the other end of that coffee machine was slurping water out of a lake in hell." I don't know, it's just so aggressive and also a little bit clunky, but I am still having a bit of a fun time. It seems like the main antagonist is a very strange character, and the mystery around that character is wanting me to keep reading. I'll say our main character, Tallow, is awful. He just sucks. I'm just reading it very slowly, to be perfectly honest. I just finished Gun Machine by Warren Ellis. I finished it this morning. This actually has a lot going on in it. So let me kind of break down the elements. It takes place in Manhattan, and the history, specifically the Native American history of Manhattan, becomes an important part of this story. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about the way that that was done, but I did appreciate learning some elements of the Native American history in Manhattan. One of the other elements of this story, which I thought was actually so interesting, is the discussion about privatizing the police force. You know the like private security force in the Spider-Man video games? You know what? Let me look it up real quick. I think they wear white, don't they? Who's the lady that's like in all white? In one of the Spider-Man games, there's like the security force that like also like are kind of bad guys that are out to get Spider-Man, and they wear like white. Anyway, this book reminded me of them because there's this private security force and they're using like privately hosted security cameras to help build up the system where they can undermine the police force that are in New York City and replace it with this private system. The conversations between the police and the security force and others about the concept of privatizing the police force was really interesting, and I thought that that was actually somewhat well done. For example, the context behind this is they're having a discussion about not paying for using this security force to help process the rest of the guns for this case. "You're not billing the city?" Tallow said, genuinely surprised. "Why would we? Bad business." "I would have thought not getting paid was bad business," Bat said, failing to ingratiate himself by unfolding another box for Sophie. "That's not how it works. You don't crush your competitors by charging more. You undercut, you make yourself useful, then indispensable, and then you offer just one extra service for a little more money, and then another, and then another. And before the mark knows it, she's giving you all her money, and all your competitors are dead." There is also the entire element about guns and like types of guns and gun history, which went really over my head and I wasn't super into. I'm not like into guns. Generally, this did have a lot going on. I found the descriptions of the killings and deaths particularly gruesome and awful. Like, I hated that element of this book, but obviously that's like a pretty key part of this type of book. So that's a me problem and not a book problem. Yeah, it was definitely a new experience, but I am excited to take this book and put it back in the little free library for other people to read if they so choose. Okay, I gotta say something. There's a scene where they go to one of the main characters. Her name is Scarly. They go to her house and her wife makes this like steak or something. But it goes into great detail about like how the food is being prepared. It's like you know, on the broiler, on the top shelf of the oven is this thing, and below that, keeping warm, is this thing, and there's caramelizing onions and bacon in a pan and blah blah blah. It's like this whole scene setting thing to kind of, I think, it gets you comfortable and warm in her home, but like none of that really matters in the book, and it was so close to the end. I thought it was a little strange. That seems like a little bit of a kill your darlings kind of piece to me. Like, I just got the sense that the author really wanted to explore what their home life was like, and he chose to do that through this meal. I'm not sure what I would rate this. Probably like 3 stars, because it's just really, really, really not my thing, but I don't think there was anything terribly wrong with it. There are some like problematic elements. The language used by the cops is not very PC. The Native American stuff, it was so important to the story, and I feel like if that's not done super well, it is kind of a problem. So I feel uncomfortable with that. This doesn't paint cops in like a wonderful light. They do some pretty awful things. Like, there's this one moment where there's a unhomed person on the street, and he pulls a knife out on our main guy. He's with his CSU buddies, and they beat him up, and so he's not a threat anymore. But then the one guy just like goes and kicks him in the head, like for fun. Disturbing. Also, this guy, the author, Warren Ellis, it says that he mostly lives in Britain. So I don't know where he's originally from. But if this is a British guy writing about New York, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Where was he born? Essex. Okay, this was published in 2013. So not super, super modern, if that helps with any of those like problematic elements, which it doesn't really to me, but you know, whatever. I'm done with this now. I don't have to talk about it anymore, and I'm gonna go live my life and at some point read the rest of A Well-Tempered Sentence. One of the examples here is, it's for colons, and it says, Noah's long wet story begins in Genesis 5:28. This long wet story. Okay, I'm done with the colon. I'm now onto the hyphen. I feel bad I'm gonna have to kick Clover out of her little spot, but I gotta go turn the camera off. Hi, baby. Yeah, good girl. Love you. Sorry. I just realized how ridiculous I look. I'm just cold, okay? It was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful day, and now it's cold and dark. I just finished reading The Well-Tempered Sentence. This is the last book that I had to finish from my little free library adventure, and I really liked this. I am excited to hold on to this. I am gonna keep it. I'm returning Gun Machine. I am actually gonna keep On Chesil Beach as well. So this is The Well-Tempered Sentence, a punctuation handbook for the innocent, the eager, and the doomed by Karen Elizabeth Gordon. It was published in 1983. I thought it was such a pleasure. It has wonderful examples for using the different types of punctuation and the various ways that you would, including like using things for time and date structures or for letters and that kind of thing. I think the most confusing punctuation is the comma, and that's because it's so versatile and it's kind of a judgment call if you want to use it or not a lot of the time. So this kind of clarified when you need to use commas versus when you might want to use commas, which was helpful to me. And then also understanding like what goes inside quotations, what goes inside parentheses, like how the punctuation works together, is something I've always kind of struggled with. So I really appreciated this for that. This also has these really fun royalty-free images, or they're from the Dover collections. So there's stuff like this, which just kind of break up the monotony of having a bunch of examples and give you something fun to look at. I know this probably isn't a book meant to read just straight, but I kind of had a good time doing it. I was reading it just now while having The Wheel of Time, which I've never read, just on in the background for the ambient noise. I'm alone at home and it makes me feel very like I can hear all of the sounds when I'm alone, you know? So I like having some ambient noise on, and so far it's just been like a lot of like grunts and like horse noises. So that, I think this is the end of my video. So let me go grab all the books and do like a final thoughts kind of thing. You ever worry that your bookshelves are gonna explode outwards? Sometimes I worry about that when I really shove them full. So these were the 3 books that I picked out from my little free library that I stored on my property, and that I donate books to regularly, and that others also donate books to regularly. It is currently at capacity, and I have probably a full library's worth of books in my home awaiting their turn. So I'll be taking 2 of the books out, which means I can put 2 in. So I have, again, The Well-Tempered Sentence, which I just finished reading now. This one took me the longest to read because it's not really like a reading kind of book. It's a reference book for punctuation. I loved how cute this book was. I find it actually a genuinely really helpful guide, and I think when I'm writing, I will probably pick it up and use it, you know? The first book that I read was On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan, and this was such a strange novella that left me so unsure of how to feel. When I finished reading it, I really thought it was excellent. And then it kind of dawned on me one moment in the book, and I did look it up. One moment in the book was a molestation scene, and it kind of threw a lot of what I got out of the book out of consideration, I suppose. But I think I can overlook that for this case. Kind of just take it for what it could be and what it might have been in more modern times in the publishing world now. So that's what I'm gonna do with this book. This book I gave 3 stars. The writing was a little clunky to me. There were a lot of like really strange descriptions and like convoluted sentence structure. And I don't think I could do any better, to be perfectly honest, but I just thought I should point it out. It's been a while since I've read kind of this style of fiction, which is more consumable, I suppose, and disposable in a way. So this was just way too violent for me. It really solidified for me that I have a weakness for gore and death and murder. It makes me really uncomfortable. I feel like obviously, but maybe not. I did see some reviews from other people about this book, and there was somebody who is like, I wish that all of this was from the murderer's perspective. And I was like, really? Gross. Like, he's nasty. I think some aspects of this book were problematic. It's kind of all I have. It honestly brought more to the table than I was expecting. And there were some elements that were just like way too convenient, I suppose. This police officer just kind of jumps to conclusions and they turn out to be correct, and I don't think there's any moment where he's actually incorrect, even though he doesn't really have any evidence. And so that's kind of weighing on me a little bit right now. The experience of reading these books was really fun. It took me so outside of my comfort zone. Genuinely, all three of these books are outside of my comfort zone in terms of what I would usually read. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you've read any of these books. I would honestly be shocked if you did, but let me know. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.